Hello guys, welcome to the video where we are going to talk about audit risk model. Now this is one such area where a lot of people tend to get confused between the terminologies. A lot of candidates answer it incorrectly when I ask these questions in my batches. So let's understand the audit risk model in a very simple and layman language. I am sure after this session, you are going to be absolutely clear with the different terminologies associated with audit risk. All right, so let's go. And one more thing before we begin, please, I hope you have subscribed to the channel. And if you find this video useful, please share it ahead. Also hit a like button. Let's go. All right, let's do this. So, the very first term, audit risk. Now, we shall be talking about this concept from the perspective of external audit, just to understand the terminologies, and we will then bring internal audit into the picture. All right. So the very first term, audit risk. Now, if I ask you a question, what is audit risk? Hey, you might think the audit risk is the risk that I don't do the audit correctly. Or some people might think that audit risk is the controls fail. But that is not what audit risk is. Audit risk, understand. If I ask you this question, that what is the end result of your audit procedure? Just take a moment and think about it. What is the end result of your audit procedure? And keep in mind, are we talking about we're talking about external audit, right? Let's talk external audit for this concept, and then we shall be bringing in the internal audit into this. So if you are doing an external audit, consider yourself to be an external auditor or stat auditor or statutory auditor, as you may want to call it. What is the end result of your audit procedure? Now you might be wondering that, okay, I do all these steps in my audit journey. The very last step is I provide my opinion in the form of audit report. And you're absolutely right. You provide your opinion in the form of your audit report. That is the end result of your audit, right? So what is the audit risk? A risk that you might say that everything is fine in the company, but in fact, everything is not fine. That means you might give a clean report when in fact the financial statements are misstated, contain misstatements. That is the audit risk. Risk of giving an inappropriate audit opinion. That is what is audit risk. A risk that you might give a clean report when in fact the financial statements are misstated. Right? So that is an audit risk. Now, audit risk has various components to it. All right. So audit risk primarily, let's give two bifurcations: risk of material misstatements and something known as a detection risk. We will come to detection risk in just a while. This risk of material misstatements, risk of material misstatements has two components: inherent risk and control risk. Now, what is inherent risk, guys? Inherent risk is a risk which is there before you doing anything, before you taking any action, before you putting any control in place. A risk which is there by default. Now, this might be due to the nature of business, the complexity of the transaction, and any such reason. But it is a risk which is there before you doing anything. That is inherent risk, right? Then we have control risk. Now, what is control risk? Okay, before this, let's just think about it. Control risk. Why do we have the controls in the very first place? Think about it a moment. Why do we have controls in the first place? Now, you might want to say that, Ayush, we have controls so that we can prevent a risk from materializing. And you are absolutely right. Every company has a set of internal controls, has a set of controls, right? Now, why the controls are there? Why does the company have controls? It might be to prevent something from happening. If it happens, the control should be able to detect. And once it detects, it should be able to correct it, right? That is why you have controls, right? So, what is a control risk? Risk that the controls will fail to do their job. Risk that the controls will fail to prevent, detect, and correct the misstatements. That is control risk, right? And what is detection risk? Now, detection risk, tell me with a yes or a no. As auditors, once you do a lot of audit procedures that you do, can it happen that you still miss out on detecting one of the misstatements? Can it happen even after you being very careful and even after you doing a lot of procedures, you still are unable to detect the misstatement? It can happen, right? I am not saying it will or it will not. My question is, it can happen. And you also will be saying this in your mind that yes, you are right. This can happen. And that is what is detection risk. A risk that auditors' processes will fail to detect the misstatements. Auditors' procedures will fail to detect the misstatements. That is what is detection risk, right? So we have understood the audit risk, we have understood inherent risk, we have also understood control risk. Now, if I ask you, out of these terminologies, inherent risk, control risk, and detection risk, which one is under the direct control of the auditor? Which one is under the direct control of the auditor? Inherent risk, control risk, or detection risk? I hope you are getting at the correct answer. Detection risk. Detection risk is the risk that is under the direct control of the auditors. Why? Because that's where you are doing your procedures. You are applying procedures to detect the misstatements, right? So let me ask you another question. And that's how we do our classes, right? That's how I also teach in my classes. I ask a lot of questions. I put you into a lot of practical scenarios. My next question is, suppose as auditors, you detect or you judge based on your professional judgment, you judge the control risk to be high. You judge the control risk to be high. Now, what does it mean? What does it mean when I say the control risk is high? That means you are saying that there are high chances that the controls will not be able to do their job. There are high chances that the controls will fail to prevent, detect, and correct the misstatements. So you are saying there are high chances that the control will fail. Okay. So my next question is, will you do more work or will you do less work on that area? You found that there are high chances that the controls will fail. So will you do more work? Will you apply more procedures to it? Or you will apply less procedures to it? I hope you are getting it the right way. You will apply risk is high. I will do more work. Absolutely right. Point taken. Well done. My next question. Now, when you are doing more procedures, is your detection risk high or detection risk low? If you are doing more substantive work, will the detection risk be high or will the detection risk be low? I hope you are getting it right. The detection risk would be low. Now you might be thinking, Ayush, I'm not clear. ये समझ में नहीं आया. फिर से समझाओ. Once more. What is detection risk? A risk that the auditor's processes will fail to detect the misstatement. There is a risk that the work that you are doing, you'll fail to detect the misstatement. Now, if you are doing more work, if you are doing more substantive work, then there is a high probability that you will be able to detect the misstatement since you are doing more substantive work now, right? So detection risk will come down. Because what is detection risk? That you will not be able to detect the misstatement based on your procedures. Now, when you are doing more substantive work, there is a high probability that you will be able to detect the misstatement. And that is why the detection risk will go low. So, for the same level of audit risk, be very careful with this one. For the same level of audit risk, if you judge the control risk to be high, the detection risk has to come down. That means you have to put more substantive work. आयुष समझ में नहीं आया. Let's look at this formula. The formula is audit risk is equals to inherent risk into control risk into detection risk. So if control risk is just high, the detection risk has to fall to keep the audit risk at the same level. All right, guys. So that was your model on audit risk. Now let's bring internal audit into the picture. We have understood this from the perspective of external audit. Now let's bring in internal audit. Why do you exist as internal auditors? To evaluate and recommend the improvements in the controls, let's say. Right? There are various things that you do, but let's talk about internal controls at this moment. Now, your end result is to give an opinion or to recommend the improvements in the internal control, right? So, what is the audit risk? You say that the internal controls are working fine when in fact they are deficient. They are not working fine. Inherent risk, we understand. There's complexity, complex controls, complex authority responsibility matrix, complex procedures. So, inherent risks is before you doing anything. Now, control risk, that also you understand. Risk that the controls will fail, that is the control risk. And detection risk, your work as the internal auditor, because you do a lot of TOC, you do a lot of test of controls, right? A risk that your processes will fail to detect the misstatements, will fail to detect the problems in internal controls, right? So that is what is the audit risk model. I hope you have now understood the audit risk model. And yes, as I said earlier, if you find this video useful, I request you to please share this with your friends. I'll see you in the next one.